If you or Charlie decide to have a kid in the next 5 years,
There'll be a star in the east.
It will take more than a decision.
how would you incentivize him or her?
I thought you were going to say, how would you? No, it's a good question. I apologize for interrupting.
How would you incentivize him or her to compete against the hungry and highly motivated kids from emerging markets like China, Brazil, Russia, or India?
Yeah, I think certainly that if you are very rich and you bring up your kids to think that they are more important in society, or that they have some special privilege simply because they came out of the right womb, that's just a terrible mistake. But Charlie has raised 8 children that I know quite well, most of them, and I don't think any of them have that sense. But if you really are going to raise your kids to think that other people should do all the work for them, and that they will be entitled to sit around and fan themselves for the rest of their lives, I mean, you will probably not get a good result. Charlie's been rich most of the time when many of his kids were growing up. Some of his kids were growing up. I've been rich while my kids were certainly when they got into high school and college. But I certainly didn't want to give them the idea that they were special just because their parents were rich. And I don't think you necessarily have to get a bad result or have children that don't have any incentives simply because their parents are rich. The one thing I don't think you want to give them an incentive to do is try and outdo their parents at what their parents happen to be good at. I don't think that makes sense, whether you're a professional athlete or a rich person or whatever it may be, a great novelist, or you name it. But I really think if you're rich and your kids turn out to have no incentives, I don't think you should point at them. I think you should probably point at yourself. Charlie?
Well, I don't think you can raise children in an affluent family and have them love working 60 hours a week in the hot sun digging fence post holes or something. That's not going to work. So to some extent you are destroying certain kinds of incentives. And my advice to you is to lose your fight as gracefully as you can.
I'm not sure if you're poor, if you can get your kids to love the idea of working 60 hours a week. They may have to, but
the kids that really get interested in something will work no matter how rich they are. But it's rare to have an Ajit-like intensity of interest. If you were a proctologist, you might not like your day, as it went on and on.
I think we better move along. Becky? When I bought the first stock in 1942, did I know everything that was going to happen afterwards? Of course not. I didn't know a damn thing. But I just needed to have one idea, and that idea wasn't really well formed. It was just probably the way practically every kid felt about the country when we'd just gone into a war. We thought America was going to win, and America was going to win then. It was going to win just generally, and savings bonds were paying 2.9%. I learned that because we bought them. They called them war bonds originally, and they called them defense bonds, and they called them savings bonds, but they were the same thing. And you print loads of money, and money is going to be worth less. Not worthless. I got in trouble doing that one time with CNBC because I said it was going to be worth separately less, but got contracted down to worthless. So it took me a few years to learn to separate those words somehow. Anyway, that's everything I know about economics and more, and Charlie can probably improve on it.
Well, it happened on a scale this time we'd never seen before. Those checks that were just mailed out to everybody who claimed to have a business and claimed to have employees, they probably drowned the country in money for a while. And as you say, they probably had to do it. But it was something that had never been done on that scale before.
But we had a problem we hadn't had before.
Yes. No, I'm not saying it wasn't a good idea.
I mean, in my book, Jay Powell's a hero. I mean, it's very, very simple. I mean, he did what he had to do. You know, if he had done nothing, it would be he would be, it'd be very easy to engage in what you would call thumb sucking then. And I shouldn't say plenty of, but there are other Fed chairmen that would have been sucking their thumbs, and the world would have fallen around them. And nobody would have exactly blamed them. They would have blamed the virus and the Chinese and all kinds of things.
Well, the really interesting company is Japan, where first they buy back all the debt, then they start buying back all the common stocks. Now that's really weird. And what did they get? 25 years of stasis. Who would have predicted that?
Well, nobody predicted anything. I mean, there's nobody's predictions that we're interested in, including our own. I mean, it's very simple. What we do know is that we can deserve your trust, and there's no reason to do things that don't deserve it, and we can't tell what. But basically, we think we're trying to build a Berkshire that can't withstand a nuclear exchange, but it can withstand as much as anything that we can do anything about. And that leaves us feeling good. It doesn't leave us feeling perfect. We'd like to even promise you more than that, but we can't promise more than that. So it's very simple.
Compensation's an interesting subject, and I'm going to write about it next year or something. But you know, it's not a market system. You can read all you want. I mean, you know, the PR people will tell you, you know, that Joe Smith's compensation was determined by a market system, and he's just like a baseball player or anything of the sort. But he's not just like a baseball player. You know, the baseball player negotiates with somebody who's spending his money to hire the baseball player and making a calculation whether he's better off laying out the money out of his own pocket, the owner of the team, to get that player. But when you get a comp committee at a large American corporation, you have somebody with an enormous interest in the amount of comp on one side of the table, and you've got somebody on the other side of the table who was not picked because they were the Doberman of the board, believe me, and who is dealing with what many times is what my friend Tom Murphy used to call play money. I mean, it's almost meaningless to the person on one side of the table whether somebody gets 100,000 shares of restricted stock or 1,000,000 shares of restricted stock, and it's not meaningless to the guy on the other side of the table. Almost every other negotiation in American business, you have some parity of concern, but you do not have a parity of concern, you know, in terms of comp at the top levels. You have a parity of concern when you get down to labor unions. I mean, the management wants to keep down the prices, and the union wants to get more money, and that's a real negotiation. And you have lots of other real negotiations in American business, but the compensation in many companies, not all obviously, but in many companies, has not been a real negotiation at all. And the management has hired comp consultants to come in, and I have never seen a comp consultant come in and say we ought to reduce this guy's salary. I've also never seen a comp consultant come in and say, why don't you get rid of this bozo? You know, I mean, you know, they can't all be wonderful, but you know, can you imagine a comp consultant doing that, never getting another assignment? It wouldn't happen. So it's it's a bad system, and it needs improvement. And it may be getting a little improvement. And as I wrote in the annual report this year, what happens with comp is the acid test of corporate reform. Because frankly, the CEOs of America, they don't care whether their boards are diverse or not diverse or anything of the sort. They care about how much money they make in a great many cases. And you, the owners, and big owners in particular, have to provide some countervailing force, or you'll have what you've had in the last 20 years, which is an enormous disparity in the rates of compensation of people at the top compared to people at the bottom, and also a disconnect between the comp of people running businesses and the results of the owners who gave them the money. So arise, shareholder. Let's go to number 5.
The stock option system will give extraordinarily liberal awards sort of by accident to some people, and it will deny other people any reward at all at some different time, in spite of great contributions made by the people who are getting nothing. So, except where we inherit it, we just don't use it. But we must be in a minority far less than 1%, right?
It's where we like to be, right? It's interesting. We inherited some stock options at Berkshire, primarily in the General Re transaction, and not through any failing of anybody, or there's no aspersion to be cast, but at all. But those options turned out to be quite valuable. They would not have been valuable if General Re had been left alone as a standalone company. They profited from the fact that other parts of Berkshire did well, and the money went to the people that had these options, who delivered nothing to the performance of Berkshire for a while. Now that is not an indictment of anybody in the least at Gen Re. It's an indictment of an option system which represents a lottery ticket and also a royalty on the passage of time, because as you know, an option holder has benefits from retained earnings and benefits not at all from dividends. And that puts his interest maybe quite contrary to that of the shareholders. So we believe in paying for performance, but we believe in tying performance to what is actually under the reasonable control of the person that's being measured. And to give a lottery ticket on the overall results of Berkshire Hathaway to someone who is running a business that's 1% of the whole is really crazy. And I would say that you have seen probably more misdirected compensation throughout the corporate America in the last 5 years, than in the 100 years before that. It's been extraordinary. And there was wealth creation in the 90s, just like in the 80s and the 70s and the 60s and the 50s. But there was a wealth transfer like had never been experienced before. And you can't blame people for wanting to cash in on it. If anybody wants to walk up and hand me a half a dozen lottery tickets for the Nebraska lottery, I'll accept them. But it will have nothing to do with how I do in terms of running Berkshire. Actually, Charlie and I think a properly designed option system, which includes cost of capital and some other factors, and ties it to the performance of the people involved, we think that can make sense when we've used various incentive programs that are similar to that. But the idea of just passing them out and telling people that for 10 years they get a free ride, and then repricing, if your stock goes down, their stock doesn't go down, their option price goes down, that is not our idea of a great compensation system.
If we are right with our general approach, it has considerably important implications, because the natural implication is that more than 99% of corporate compensation systems are more than a little crazy in America. And I want to emphasize that Berkshire is not illiberal. I mean, we've got various incentive systems out where people make tens of millions and may make hundreds of millions. So we're not against rewards for people who make vast contributions. But a system that's basically capricious and which doesn't tailor the results per person and per activity very well, we just think it's crazy.
We love to see people that are associated with Berkshire making money as long as they're making money for you at the same time. It's very simple. But we don't want them to get a free ride off your money.